The major component of the skeletal system are the bones, so that's going to be what we discuss now. There are a number of cartilages involved in the skeletal system. First of all, almost all of our bones begin as cartilage. You'll remember that the basic structure of cartilage is mostly water. That's what gives cartilage its resiliency. The cartilage does not have its own blood supply, nor does it have its own nerve supply. It relies on its nutrition from the perichondrium which surrounds it. The cells of the cartilage are the chondrocytes, and they are trapped within the lacunae, the hollow spaces within the jelly-like matrix. There are three types of cartilage. Hyaline cartilage has fine collagen fibers in it, which provides this cartilage with flexibility and resilience. We find this in the articular cartilage on the ends of the bones, the costal cartilage that holds the ribs to the sternum, the cartilage of the trachea, and the cartilage of the nose. Elastic cartilage has elastic fibers as well as collagen fibers. This cartilage withstands bending well. This is the cartilage that's found in the ear and the epiglottis of the larynx. And then we have the fibrocartilage. Here the collagen fibers are very thick so that we have a pressure-resistant type structure. The vertebral discs and the menisci of the knee, these are the pad-like cartilages in the knee. So as we look, all of the blue spaces are your articular cartilage, and you can see it's at the ends of almost all of your bones. Here's that costal cartilage, here's the nasal cartilage. Elastic cartilage is found in the ear and here in the trachea, this epiglottis. And we see the fibrocartilage in those intervertebral discs, here in the pubic symphysis, and these padding cartilages of the knee. Chondrocytes retain their ability to divide throughout life, so cartilage can grow. Appositional growth is when the cartilage gets thicker. This is growth from the outside. New cells are formed under the perichondrium to increase the thickness of the cartilage. These perichondrial cells will secrete matrix between the perichondrium and the old cartilage to increase the thickness, and the chondrocytes will become trapped in the new matrix. Interstitial growth is growth from the inside. This allows the cartilage to get longer. Here the chondrocytes divide, and new matrix is produced between them so that they are pushed apart and we increase the length of the cartilage. In adolescence, cartilage growth pretty much stops. Some cartilage continues to grow. And with aging, cartilage can calcify. A certain amount of calcification of the cartilage is normal, but not too much. Now, when we calcify cartilage, this is not bone. It simply has calcium salts deposited in it. This kind of calcium salt deposit does not make the cartilage bone, but really makes it brittle. Bones have several functions. They provide support for the body and the soft organs of the body. They also protect. Things like the brain, the spinal cord, and the vital organs are covered by bone. Without bones, we would not be able to move. They're the levers on which muscles can pull. Bones store calcium and fat, and they're the site of blood formation, or hematopoiesis. The skeletal system is composed of the bones, the joints, the cartilages, and the ligaments. The ligaments are what hold the bones together. There are 206 bones with 2 divisions of the skeletal system. The axial skeleton is the trunk and the skull, and the appendicular skeleton are the limbs, the arms and the legs, and the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. These are the bones that attach the limbs to the axial skeleton. We can classify bones based on their shape. We have long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Long bones are longer than they are wide. They have a shaft that's composed of compact bone and ends that are composed of spongy bone covered by compact bone. All of your limb bones, with the exception of ankles, wrist, and patella, are long bones. Short bones are cube-shaped. They have a spongy bone center with a compact bone shell. Sesamoid bones are a special type of short bone. These are bones that form within tendons. These develop after birth. Everyone has a patella, which is a sesamoid bone. It develops in the tendon of the knee. However, depending on how you use your joints, you may have other sesamoid bones. The wrist, the ankle bones, and the patella are examples of short bones. Flat bones are thin, flattened, and slightly curved. They are also a spongy bone trapped between 2 compact bone layers. The ribs, the bones of the skull, the sternum, and the scapula are examples of flat bones. And finally, the irregular bones sort of defy classification. They don't fit into any of the other 3 because of their odd shape. They have a spongy bone interior with a thin layer of compact bone around them. The vertebra and the hip bones are examples of irregular bones. Bones can also be classified on their structure or texture. We have compact bone, which is dense and organized into osteons, and we have spongy bone or cancellous bone. This bone has an open structure with bony scaffolding known as trabeculae. The open areas may be filled with bone marrow. Here you see spongy bone, and you can see it looks a lot like a sponge, these big holes. These are the trabeculae. And compact bone, which is much denser. This is a flat bone out of the skull, so you've got the spongy bone interior with the compact bone shell. Bones are the organs of the skeletal system. They're made up of several tissue types. Of course, osseous tissue or bone tissue is the major component, but they also have nervous tissue, cartilage tissue, fibrous connective tissue which covers the bone and lines the cavities of the bone, and muscle and epithelial tissue and the blood vessels that go through the bone. The short, flat, and irregular bones all have sort of a similar structure. They don't have a shaft or an epiphysis, and they consist of thin plates of spongy bone that's covered by compact bone. There is no medullary cavity, but the marrow is found in all of those spaces of the spongy bone. The periosteum covers the compact bone, and the endosteum covers all of the spongy bone trabeculae on the inside. Long bones have more structure to them. They have a diaphysis, which is the shaft, and it's composed of compact bone. This surrounds a cavity in the bone called the medullary cavity. The epiphysis is the end of the bone. This is composed of spongy bone surrounded by compact bone. The articular surface is covered in articular cartilage. This is a hyaline cartilage. This helps absorb stress when the bones pound together as you move. The epiphyseal line starts out as a hyaline cartilage plate in growing bones. Once the bone completes growing, the epiphyseal cartilage ossifies and you have what's called the epiphyseal plate. So here you see the diaphysis of the bone with the medullary cavity, the hollow space, and this is compact bone that makes up the diaphysis. The epiphysis, the proximal epiphysis, and the distal epiphysis have the articular cartilage on the ends. We have the compact bone, and we have the spongy bone. This little cutout is right here. Here you see the compact bone shell. Here is the spongy bone interior. These are the trabeculae. Here would be the marrow spaces. Notice how we have blood vessels feeding all of this. And this is the articular cartilage. Here is the endosteum that covers all of those trabeculae. There are several membranes associated with the bone. The periosteum is the outer covering. This is a dense, irregular connective tissue that's a double-layered membrane. On the inside, it has the osteogenic cells. These cells are capable of becoming either osteoblasts or osteoclasts that are involved in bone remodeling. There is a rich blood and nerve supply to the periosteum, and Sharpie's fibers are connective tissue fibers that connect it very tightly to the bone. Because this is a dense, irregular connective tissue, tendons and ligaments can put their fibers into it, and so you have a very strong anchor for tendons and ligaments. The endosteum is the internal covering of the bone. This is going to cover the trabeculae of the spongy bone and line the medullary cavity. This also contains osteogenic cells underneath it that can turn into osteoblasts and osteoclasts that are involved in bone remodeling. So looking at the diaphysis, we have our compact bone. Here is the periosteum, and these are the Sharpie's fibers that hold it to the bone. And we have the endosteum lining the medullary cavity. You'll remember we saw the endosteum covering the trabeculae earlier. Hematopoiesis is one of the functions of the bone. That's the production of blood cells. Red marrow is the active tissue that produces red blood cells. This is found in spongy bone cavities of some of the bones. In newborns, the medullary cavities and all of the spongy bone contain red marrow. Newborns and growing children not only have to replace blood cells, but make new ones to keep up with their growth. Bone marrow can be transplanted, and when you do a bone marrow transplant, they take about 100 milliliters of bone marrow from the donor, and they use the vertebra. You'll remember that this is a spongy bone center with a compact bone shell, and the vertebra retain red marrow throughout life. This marrow is then inserted into the recipient's vertebra. You have to go down and hit pretty much every vertebra to do this. Yellow marrow is the fat storage area of the body. Most of the red marrow in adults converts to yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is simply fat, and this is one of the places we store fat in the body. Medullary cavities and the ends of some long bones have this converted over as we age. However, yellow marrow can convert back to red marrow in severe anemia. Another feature of bone anatomy are the bone markings. These are structures on the outside of the bone. These are various projections, depressions, openings, grooves. They're sites where muscles can attach, ligaments and tendons can attach. They're also part of our joint surfaces. Bones have to fit together, and so we'll have depressions in one bone that will accept projections from another bone. Also, blood vessels and nerves travel on the outside of bones, and they need grooves in which to travel. As we begin to examine the microscopic anatomy of the bone, we need to look at the cells. There are 5 major cell types. You'll remember that bone is connective tissue, and all connective tissue comes from mesenchyme cells. So each of these specialized cells came from the same basic cell type, the mesenchyme. We have osteogenic cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes, bone lining cells, and osteoclasts. The osteogenic cells are also called osteoprogenitor cells. These are mitotically active and they're called stem cells. They're found in the periosteum and the endosteum. When stimulated, these can differentiate into either osteoblasts or bone lining cells. We always have some osteogenic cells left in the periosteum or the endosteum area. The osteoblasts are the bone-forming cells. You have to remember that blasts build. They secrete the unmineralized bone matrix, or what's called the osteoid. This will include the collagen fibers and the calcium binding proteins. Collagen makes about 90% of the bone protein. Osteoblasts are actively mitotic, so they can continue division. Osteocytes are the mature bone cells. These are osteoblasts that get trapped in the lacuna and mature. They monitor and maintain bone matrix, but they also act as stress or strain sensors. These cells respond to mechanical stimuli and communicate with osteoblasts and osteoclasts, which are the bone-eating cells, so bone remodeling can occur. The bone lining cells are flat cells on the bone surfaces. We think that they help maintain the matrix. On the external bone surface, they're called periosteal cells, and if they're lining the internal surfaces, they're called endosteal cells. The osteoclasts are derived from hematopoietic stem cells that eventually become macrophages. These cells are giant multinucleate cells, and they resorb bone, that is, they break it down. You have to remember that clasts crush. Compact bone has an interesting microscopic structure. Compact bone is composed of osteons or Haversian systems. This is the structural unit of all compact bone. An osteon is an elongated cylinder that runs parallel to the long axis of the bone. Each osteon acts as a tiny little weight-bearing pillar. The cylinder consists of several rings of bone matrix. Each ring is a lamella. Collagen fibers run in different directions in the adjacent rings. This allows the bone to withstand stress and resist twisting. Bone salts, the minerals, are in between the collagen fibers to give the bone its strength. So here is one osteon or Haversian system with 3 lamella. Here we see the blood vessels, but these are the collagen fibers that are running in different directions. You can see that if we twist in one direction, we would have resisting fibers. Twist in the other direction, different fibers would resist. This is an actual bone. Here is a slide of bone that's been stained. Here is the central canal with the blood vessels and the nerves. Here are the osteocytes, and each little ring here is part of the lamella. There are several canals in the bone. The central or Haversian canal runs through the core of the osteon and contains the blood vessels and nerve fibers. The canaliculi are little canals that connect the lacuna. This allows nutrients to get to the bone cells and waste products to go away from the bone cells. Volkmann's or perforating canals are blood vessels that perforate to reach different osteons. And the lacuna are the little hollow spaces in the bone that contain the osteocytes. The osteocytes, remember, maintain the matrix. So here you see several osteons or Haversian systems with their central canal, the blood vessels and the nerve. Here you see those penetrating Volkmann's canals so that we can get blood to different osteons. These are the lacunae with the osteons. We have several layers or lamella here. Here is that central canal with the blood vessels and the nerves, and the canaliculi will allow nutrients to diffuse to the cells and waste products to diffuse back to the blood. Bone is composed of both organic and inorganic components. The organic components are all of the cells, the osteogenic cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes, bone lining cells, and osteoclasts, as well as the osteoid. About 1/3 of the bone matrix is secreted by the osteoblasts and has these protein fibers, the collagen, that provide the flexibility and strength for the bone. The inorganic components are the hydroxyapatites. These are the mineral salts, calcium and phosphate salts. These give hardness to the bone and help the bone resist compression.